My neighbor demanded I cut down my trees because the leaves blow into my yard. When I refused, he secretly hired someone to chop them down and bragged, "Problem solved, you should thank me." I showed him the property line survey and said, "You just committed property damage, and you'll be paying for fully grown replacements." I've lived in the same house in Franklin, Tennessee for over 15 years. It's an older neighborhood with big yards and old-growth trees. That's why I bought the place. I like the quiet, the space, and the privacy. My backyard is fenced in, and just inside the fence line I have 4 big maple trees that give me shade in the summer and bright colors in the fall. They were full-grown when I moved in. To me, they were part of the house. I never imagined they'd become the center of a huge fight. About 2 years ago, a new couple moved in next door. The guy's name was Richard. His wife kept to herself, but he made sure everyone knew who he was. He introduced himself the first week they moved in and seemed all right at first. Friendly, loud, kind of over the top. But that changed fast. He started complaining about little things right away. Where the mail carrier walked. When the trash guys came. The sound of lawnmowers on Sundays. And then, of course, the leaves. It started with a comment. One fall afternoon, I was out back sweeping my deck when he leaned over the fence and said, "You know, your trees drop a lot of leaves into my yard." I didn't think much of it. I said something like, "Yeah, they do that. Sorry if it's a pain." Just being polite. But that wasn't enough for him. He said, "You should think about cutting them down. Or at least the ones close to my side. I spend hours cleaning them up." I looked at him, kind of stunned. "Cut them down. They're just trees," he said, like they were weeds or trash. "It's not like they're fruit trees or anything useful." I told him no. Plain and simple. "They're on my property," I said. "And I like them." That didn't sit well with Richard. His whole mood shifted. He stared at me like I'd just insulted him. After that, he got passive-aggressive. He started blowing leaves back over the fence into my yard. I caught him once, standing there with a leaf blower, shooting them through the slats. When I said something, he just shrugged and said, "I'm keeping my yard clean. Not my problem where the wind takes them." I ignored him. I raked, cleaned up, and tried to let it go. I figured it would blow over. I was wrong. One Saturday morning, I was sitting in my kitchen drinking coffee when I heard a chainsaw. Loud. Close. I got up and looked out my window, and I froze. There were 2 guys in my backyard. With chainsaws. Cutting down my trees. I ran out the back door in my pajamas, yelling, "Hey, what the hell are you doing?" They stopped. One of them looked at me and said, "You the homeowner?" "Yes," I shouted. "What are you doing on my property?" "We were hired to cut these down," the other guy said, pointing at the trees. "By who?" He pointed next door. That guy said they were his. I lost it. I ran straight to Richard's house and banged on his back door. He came out onto his deck with a coffee in hand, calm as could be. "You send those guys into my yard?" I yelled. "Yep," he said. "Problem solved." "You're welcome." "You hired someone to cut down my trees without even talking to me?" "They were right up against the line," he said. "I figured they were shared. And honestly, I did you a favor." I just stood there, shaking. "You have no idea what you just did." He smirked. "They were a nuisance. Now they're gone. You should be thanking me." I went inside and dug out the property survey from when I bought the house. It was clear. Every tree was 2 to 3 feet inside my fence line. Fully on my property. I scanned it. Saved it. Sent a copy to my lawyer. Richard had no clue what he'd just started. I called my lawyer first thing Monday morning. I gave him the survey, the pictures I took of the trees before and after, and even a copy of the receipt from when I paid an arborist last year to trim them. He looked it all over and said, "Yeah, this is clear-cut trespassing and property damage." Pun intended, I guess. He helped me file a police report right away. They sent an officer to my house to take photos and notes. I told them everything, how I'd said no, how Richard had hired the tree guys without permission, how he admitted to it right to my face. The officer didn't say much, but he took it seriously. Said they'd follow up with Richard and the tree service. That was just the beginning. I also got in touch with an arborist and a tree appraiser. Turns out, mature maple trees like mine are worth a hell of a lot more than most people think. They gave me a full report showing the total value of the destroyed trees was just over $28,000. Yeah, 28 grand. For trees. Because it takes decades for them to grow to that size, and you can't just replace them with saplings and call it even. Richard found that out the hard way. When the police followed up, Richard tried to claim he thought they were his trees. Said he wasn't sure where the property line was, but then they asked the tree service guys what he told them. And those guys? They admitted he told them, cut them all down, they're mine now. The cops gave me a copy of their statements. I gave all of it to my lawyer. We filed a civil suit for property damage, trespassing, and removal of valuable landscaping. Richard didn't take it seriously at first. He kept acting smug, walking around his yard like nothing had happened. But then he got served. And things changed. Suddenly, he wasn't waving at neighbors anymore. He wasn't out back much either. He tried to avoid me completely. Too late for that. While the case was pending, I went ahead and had new trees brought in. Not saplings. I spent extra and had large, mature maples transported and planted by professionals. It cost a fortune, but not to me. I knew it would all come out in court. My lawyer made sure of that. The court date came 6 months later. Richard showed up with a lawyer who looked like she didn't want to be there. They tried to argue that the trees were an eyesore and caused a nuisance. The judge shut that down immediately. The trees were not on your property, he said. And your client admits to hiring people to remove them. We showed the property survey, the appraiser's report, the police statements, and I even played a recording from the day it happened. Yep, I had recorded the tree cutters with my phone once I realized what was going on. You could hear one of them say, he told us to cut everything that hangs over his side. That sealed it. The judge ruled in my favor. Richard had to pay the full cost of the replacement trees, the value of the destroyed ones, and legal fees. Altogether, over $40,000. And here's where it gets even better. Because Richard didn't have that kind of money. He tried to appeal, lost again, and ended up having to take out a second mortgage just to pay it off. And let me tell you, he hated that. You could see it eating him up every time he looked at those new trees, tall and healthy, right along the fence line. The best part? I had them planted just a little closer to the fence this time. Still within my property, but just enough so that their branches hung a little farther over his side than before. Perfectly legal. And every fall, when the wind picks up and the leaves start drifting into his yard again, I sit on my deck with a coffee, just like he did. Only now I smile for a different reason. A few months after the court ruling, I thought the storm had passed. Richard kept his distance. He wasn't smug anymore. He barely even looked in my direction, which suited me just fine. But if you've ever dealt with someone like him, you know, guys like that don't just let it go. They can't stand losing, especially when it's public. And Richard had lost badly. Word got around the neighborhood fast. People stopped chatting him up during walks. Some even stopped waving. He'd been the loud, cocky guy who barked orders and blew leaves over fences. Now he was just the guy who got sued over trees. That humiliation must have festered. Because one morning, I woke up to find deep scratches on the trunks of my new maples. Not natural ones. These were deliberate, carved in with something sharp, deep enough to strip bark. My stomach dropped. I called the tree company immediately. They sent someone out, and he confirmed it. Someone had intentionally damaged them. If the cuts got infected or went too deep, the trees could die. The same day, I checked my backyard cameras. I'd had them installed after the first incident. No way was I letting him or anyone else touch my property again without a record. And there it was. Blurry footage, but clear enough to make out a shape sneaking around at night. Wearing a hoodie, gloves, head down. Didn't show a face, but the body language was all too familiar. I called the police again. They took the footage and the report. Said they'd investigate, but without a clear ID, it'd be hard to charge anyone. Still, they made a point to visit Richard's house. Just seeing the cop car parked out front again probably made his blood boil. That night, I heard loud voices next door. Richard yelling at someone. I couldn't hear it all, but I caught bits like I didn't do anything, and they're setting me up. Guess he figured I could see him unraveling. But this time, I wasn't just waiting for the cops to come through. I got a private investigator. Not cheap, but worth every penny. The guy surveilled Richard for 2 weeks. Followed his routines. Took notes. Dug into public records. What he found floored me. Turns out, Richard had some serious financial problems even before the lawsuit. He'd been dodging credit cards, had liens from back taxes, and his mortgage was underwater even before he borrowed more to pay me. The guy was drowning and pretending to be king of the block. One night, the PI got photos of him talking to someone in a hardware store parking lot. Same guy who had done the tree cutting before, one of the workers. My PI tailed him. Got a plate. Turned over everything to my lawyer. With the damage to the new trees and this new link between Richard and the same guy he'd hired before, we had enough to bring another civil claim, this time for vandalism and intentional property damage. My lawyer sent over a demand letter, letting Richard know we had evidence and we were preparing another lawsuit. That same week, Richard's house went up for sale. Coward didn't even respond. Just ran. He sold the place at a loss, had to because word had gotten out. Who wants to buy a house from a guy known for sneaking into yards and killing trees out of spite? But even after he left, I wasn't done. He still owed me. My lawyer filed a lien on the proceeds of the home sale, so a chunk of whatever he made went straight into my pocket to cover the new damages. I ended up breaking even. No loss, no profit. But you know what? I got my piece back. And now, when I sit out on my deck, those new maples are doing just fine. Still standing. Still tall. Still shedding leaves like nature intended. Only now there's nobody next door to whine about them. About a month after Richard sold the house, I thought maybe, just maybe, things would quiet down for good. But I should have known better. People like Richard don't just walk away clean, they want a last word. A final jab. And true to form, he found one more way to throw a punch before disappearing for good. I was coming home from the grocery store one afternoon when I noticed a white envelope stuck in my front door. No return address, just my name, handwritten. I opened it on the porch. Inside was a typed letter. Short, smug, pure Richard. Hope you enjoy your precious trees. You sure paid enough for them. And thanks for teaching me what kind of neighbor not to be. Consider this chapter closed. There was no signature. Just that smug tone I'd learned to recognize too well. I laughed out loud. Not because it was funny, but because it was pathetic. This man had lost tens of thousands of dollars, his house, and whatever shred of neighborhood respect he had, all because he couldn't handle a few leaves. But the story didn't quite end there. 3 weeks later, I got a call from the same private investigator. You might want to hear this, he said. Turns out, he'd kept tabs on Richard even after the move, purely out of curiosity. The guy had taken a job with a landscaping company down in Alabama. Of all things, he was trimming hedges and planting bushes for rich clients in gated communities. The irony nearly made me choke. The man who'd destroyed trees and tried to bully me out of my own yard was now out there digging holes in other people's gardens, under someone else's orders, taking crop from homeowners. No power, no control, just sweat and dirt. Poetic. I decided not to respond to the letter. No final words. No confrontation. He didn't deserve it. The trees were still standing. My yard was still mine. And he? He was a bitter footnote in someone else's neighborhood now. But every time I rake leaves, I take my time. I let the wind do its thing. And I don't mind if a few drift into the yard next door. Because peace, real peace, comes when you know you stood your ground, and the other guy had to move.